critically analyzes the experiences, histories, and perceptions of black males in American society. I'm Dr. THasan-Johnson, Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Fresno State, black male advocate, and black male studies scholar. In the program, we examine current events while engaging concepts ranging from institutionalized anti-black misandry to gynocentrism from a black masculinist perspective. Our goal is to remind people of black men's humanity. Call in after a half hour to the show at 310-928-7733. All right, welcome to the Onyx Report with Dr. THasan-Johnson. As some of you know, if you caught the show last night on Interlight with a Journey into Self with Sarah, the host, and myself, we talked about the spiritual meaning of Kobe's life and his passing. You know, of course, talking about Kobe Bryant, who passed away Sunday in a crashed helicopter incident. But in talking about that, I told him, I mentioned to you all that Sarah and I would be back tonight to talk about some other dimensions of this situation. Hold on. Got some sound going. Let me check with my engineer. We good? Okay. So we talked about how we would come back and deal with some other dimensions to this issue, right? And one of the biggest dimensions that came about is not 2 hours into Kobe's passing, having been reported, did we, hear from this Washington Post journalist who eventually was suspended after tweeting a link to a 2016 story about Kobe Bryant's rape case, right? And, from there, referred to him basically as a rapist. And most people still didn't even know what was going on. People were still waiting to find out, what the situation was, what caused it, what the issue was. And then you had this, kind of blatant focusing on framing him as nothing more than a rapist. Now, this in and of itself is understandable if you're used to this kind of vitriol being targeted toward black men, but suffice it to say it lacked any kind of tact or timing, and so the sheer disrespect of it became one of the focal points, and it frustrated so many black men, particularly black men on social media, that we began to kind of collect these tweets and videos and really began to pull them together. And one of the things that came about was, we could see this kind of linking of both white and black feminists in their critique of Kobe and using his passing as an opportunity to slam black men. I want to read a quote from, Dr. Tommy Curry. He posted this publicly, and he made an interesting statement regarding all of this, right? And one of the things he says in here, I'm just going to read the whole quote. He says, "Every time a black man dies in this country, there's a concerted effort by white racists and feminists to remind the world of his inhumanity. Kobe is not the first and will not be the last. We will have this same discussion about Neil deGrasse Tyson, Nate Parker, Gennaro Wilson, Brian Banks, and the Central Park Five. A few months ago, the same conversation was had about Michael Jackson, who was not convicted either. It amazes me that year after year, the Innocence Project finds more and more evidence that black men are more likely to be innocent regarding crimes involving sexual assault and homicide, but social media pundits and academics are convinced that every accuser, even interracial accusers, which have the highest rate of error in eyewitness identification, is correct. Said differently, the woke politics of today suggests that the white supremacists of the Jim Crow South had it right. Every black man accused of rape is a rapist, even when he's not. So America, what is the standard of innocence? This country, the academy, thousands of academics have no problem with a system that does not convict women generally for sexual assault or rape, despite the now decade-long finding that women rape just as much as men. But there's something about accusing black men that excites America. It excites Americans, black and white, to believe there's something savage about black males. This is the characterological defect I write about in The Man Not. Black men are oppressed by the threat of accusations against them because they cannot be innocent. And I would add to Dr. Curry's quote, not only can they not be innocent, they can't be forgiven. Even if the evidence, clearly shows that he's likely to be innocent, black men cannot be forgiven. We must remain perpetual animals, perpetual monsters, and that has to stay. And at least that's what we're seeing in the treatment of black men. White men who are accused of sexual assault, they may or may not disappear from the public eye. Like if we were talking about, Kevin Spacey, or they may be in and out of court with no real concrete conclusion, like we're seeing with Harvey Weinstein. But when it comes to black men, the court of public opinion is at the end of the day the only court, and it does not forgive, it does not acknowledge innocent. It just remains locked in a perpetual state of criminalizing and punishing black men ongoing. And so what we find is, not only with celebrities, but with even everyday black men, legacy of accusation, particularly on sexual grounds, is such that it is at the mere publicizing an accusation, at the mere mention of it, the guilt is synonymous with that, perpetually so. And so these kind of situations that have been coming about and have remained in the public eye have been getting more and more airplay. I want to welcome, to tonight. I mentioned him earlier. We talked on his show last night. I want to welcome him back to the Onyx Report today. Lasara, you online?
What's up, brother?
Otap, how you doing?
Fantastic.
Beautiful. Last night, if you missed it, we had a conversation about Kobe, where we dealt with the spiritual ramifications of his death. We dealt with the meaning of his life. And Sarah got a chance to really, break into, the meaning of Kobe, not only in general, but even to himself and his son. Tonight is a little different. We're going to look at the conversation around Kobe and kind of talk about what we're seeing and what it means. Now, Sarah, did you want to say anything just to kind of let people know you're here?
Yeah, I appreciate being back on the Onyx Report with the Black Male Advocate, and we'll be talking, more along those lines of the how Kobe represented the black male from various perspectives, as a father, a positive black image, as a father, a positive black image as a husband, and just in terms of just being a well-rounded, balanced individual. So last night we spoke about the spiritual aspect, the things that he represented in terms of, how he was able to create the life that he wanted for himself, and using these spiritual principles. But, as Brother Hasan has pointed out, that image, that black image, has been something that's been under attack. And, so we want to focus on that. And even as strong as a positive image as the brother has demonstrated throughout his life, we've seen that even that's on attack in the wake of his untimely demise.
Absolutely. And what I would like to do right now is I want to give the people some examples of the kind of vitriol that many of us have been hearing in the media, reading about on Twitter and other social media platforms, and just really the kind of, just sheer really hatred of black men that we come across. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play a short clip of a video that was posted shortly after Kobe passed, and then I'm going to read a couple of tweets, and then we'll jump in and begin to kind of break them down. So first off with the video.
It's interesting because I do see a lot of black women who are, again with this like faux sympathy, like it's just so easy to get black women emotionally worked up over stuff. So, oh, Kobe, oh, this or that. And I'm just thinking, like, he really didn't give a fuck about black women. So I was actually kind of surprised that, there was all these posts flying up on social media. And and whatever. And I do think it's quite interesting. It's been about 6 years that I've been saying things are going to escalate, things are going to get worse. Nobody is exempt from just the vengeance that the Dark Mother in particular brings upon people. If you live your life and carry out your life in a certain way to get certain things in return, then you're going to get it. And these days you're going to get it quick. There's no waiting period any longer for the bullshit that people receive due to the things that they do and, just acts that they carry out. So I wrote, and, he was obviously married. He had over 100 affairs. So that's another thing. He definitely, regarding the spiritual and the natural aspect of it, he did not understand the first law of nature, which is the law of self-preservation. And we can see that by looking at his family. I wouldn't really say he was an ally of indigenous women, of so-called black women in particular. These are most of the women that I see online expressing this sympathy for him. So it's quite interesting. Another thing, he was known to make colorist statements. Like he did make a statement to one athlete where he was like, you go to the hole like a light-skinned dude or whatever. Kind of like a mocking type of thing. So that's quite interesting, especially being that, well, you're with a light-skinned, woman or whatever. So why are you making cracks and jokes about light-skinned guys? So the colorism thing, and that's again hypocrisy on his end.
Brother Sarah, tell me what you heard.
Brother, I don't even know where to start with that one. For one, I got the impression that the sister was projecting her own issues onto Kobe, her issues with black men onto Kobe. And it seemed that she was trying her best to cherry pick information to fit the conclusion that she wanted. Mm-hmm. And then overlook the information that contradicted that, her conclusion. Right. And so, and then tried to find some type of spiritual justification for it, which was completely ridiculous. What she was talking about in terms of the Dark Mother, she was referring to the goddess Kali, who is one of the goddesses in the Hindu pantheon, and saying that the goddess Kali was enacting vengeance. Mm-hmm. Oh, and which is a ridiculous conclusion, because God does not enact vengeance.
Okay.
Karma is the operative law, right? And so in karma, she doesn't obviously understand karma, but karma is something that operates within each individual, which is based upon the actions that have occurred in the current life and over an accumulation of lives. And so no one can, with any kind of accuracy, determine what somebody else's karma is and what the outcome of someone's karma or the karmic debt that someone has paid. No one can do that for someone else, and by looking at someone's actions in the current life, we see that there's a number of people who have done very evil things, who have nothing happen to them in the current life, right? And so you can't look at the fact that someone experiences something in this life and draw a conclusion about whether their actions in this life have created karmic consequences for them. So that's one. Then you look at the fact that he has his 3 daughters are black girls, right? And he has no love for black women. And we look at the fact that when Kobe was first coming into the league, Kobe took a black woman, black girl, Brandy, on his prom date. And so the conclusion that he was averse and hated black women is completely ridiculous, and there's no support for that. You know, he supported black women as basketball players. The black women basketball players in the WNBA all have spoke glowingly about the type of support that he's given them and help that he's and how he's aided women's basketball and has been a mentor for them, someone that they look up to. These black women, okay, in the NBA have said this, right? So it's really just, from what I heard there, was just someone who has issues with black men that's trying to project that onto, her internal hatred onto this brother.
Mm-hmm. And it's easy to do, when you have somewhat of a platform. I talked about on a previous show, whether we're talking about mainstream entertainment or the academy, it's been easier for these types of feminists to get a platform to make these kind of statements and really slander black men, even intellectually, even academically. And it's been acceptable. It's been allowed for, Now, there's a couple of these that I want to look at that I came across even on Twitter that have been kind of really been going around amongst black men as we've discussed it. Now, obviously, with the videos and the tweets, I'm not giving their handles or their names, partially because, I want to be careful about the legalities around things. The other reason is because I don't really want to support these channels, but I do want to make us clear about what we're hearing. So one such person on Twitter wrote, "I wanted to wait to post this because I didn't want to offend, but this is something more black men need to think about, the transfer of wealth. Wealth is transferred from man to woman. That being said, a non-black woman will get the wealth of Kobe Bryant. A black woman's net worth is $5. Wonder why?" Which somehow erases the fact that he has 2 black daughters, but we'll move past it.
Well, 2 now.
3. Oh, 2 now. Excuse, yeah, absolutely. And peace to her. And I apologize, just in my frustration and getting ready to the show, I wanted to start with my condolences to the Bryant family. So let me stop and do that first off. And I should have done that earlier, but also, to acknowledge the passing of not only Kobe, but of course his daughter. This is Gianna, who passed in the helicopter crash as well. Right. And again, it's not been but 2 hours before these types of posts were made. So another one says, "Your timing is perfect. It's relevant now. It came to light because of what's going on currently. All these people saying not the right time, as if this horrible accident was the right time. Don't let you these sheep get you down." So she's encouraging the previous the tweet I read. Another one writes, "Looks like karma came to get Kobe after all. You don't do no female like that. Karma can come in any form. When you do a female that's loyal, real down, always there, faithful to you, I'll be trying to tell you, R.I.P. Kobe Bryant." Right. And another one up says, "I'm sending a lot of love to all the black women who are going to inevitably do the work of unearthing the nuanced truth about Kobe's sexual abuse history." Right. Mind you, this is the day he passed. Right. Another one wrote, "Congrats to the black men who hate black women. Go die, Kobe Bryant and Lamar Odom. May you both catch herpes. Team Celtics." This is the kind of stuff that we're hearing. My second video, we're only going to play about a minute and a half, but let's give a listen to that so we can hear more of what's been coming out.
We don't give a fuck about these niggas. Y'all care about them. We don't. I said what the fuck I said. Now let a black woman celebrity die in a crash, and she's a swirler. Jody Smith Turner Jackson, let her ass die in a helicopter crash. These niggas will be celebrating. These niggas would be celebrating. I said what the fuck I said, my girl. Exactly, made it, dog. Let them all crash. I don't give a fuck. How about that, huh? I don't give a fuck if they got money or they broke. All these niggas could die in a helicopter crash. I don't give a fuck.
Okay, let's stop.
I said what I said. You want to jump your little Latina ass on my...
Hey, and that was a 2-hour stream. I just couldn't tolerate more than that. But this is the level of vitriol that many black men are responding to at the loss of somebody that they respect. You know, a hero of sorts. Sarah, did you want to respond to any of that before we move forward?
Oh man. You know, again, I think it is when you listen to that and the level of emotion, the level of vitriol, as you pointed out, you can see that she is projecting her own personal issues based upon her own experiences, which are based upon her choices in men. You know, and that is misdirected in terms of her anger and frustration, you know, with black men, and she's using this as an opportunity to bash black men and you know, use Kobe as an example of her anger at black men.
Mm-hmm. Well, you also heard one of them talking again about karma, again about it as a vengeful force. So this is seeming like a consistent trend unto itself. And that's why I really appreciated you coming up to kind of frame Kali and karma for us, because I think people take it as, you know, somehow, you know, just this idea of vengeance, you know, that the universe is going to exact for, you know, whatever kind of crime. I'm not exactly sure what that had to do with Kobe's daughter, but, you know, I still, you know, appreciate you being here to kind of put some context to that as well, because that seems like a consistent trope too with some of these people.
Yeah, I did notice that. And you know, just for a little bit of insight into, you know, goddess Kali, the symbolic, one of the symbolic aspects of Kali is that she is a destroyer of ego, a destroyer of ego. So ego is represented by all of the negative emotions, ironically, which the sister was expressing, you know, the anger and lust, you know, depression, fear, you know, all those things. And, you know, so she's a destroyer of that. And again, I want to emphasize that God does not enact punishment because of the fact that God created the universe based upon universal principles, of which karma is one. But karma cannot be evaluated based upon the results of simply the results of the current life. Because you both obtain and create karma from your actions in the current life and cumulative karma that has been built from prior lives. And so it's not for someone to judge, you know, what is being experienced by another.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I appreciate that, and we can speak, you know, esoterically. The whole notion of fearing karma is from the vantage point of ego. right? But what we've seen people do with that is literalize it in a particular way, where it becomes a tool for them to use and target at whomever they're angry about. Just a station break moment. Make sure that if you're interested in joining the conversation, you call in. The number is 310-928-7733. And I think today we might have a few callers come in. But one of the things I kind of want to go back to when we talk about this is the notion that, you know, in this new cancel culture that we have, right, where people are permanently canceled, and they shouldn't be acknowledged, they shouldn't be heard, and definitely, you know, whatever their side of the story might be is not relevant. In this culture we have, it has adversely impacted black men, because this culture of cancel culture, the hashtag believe her, these frameworks did not come about with an appreciation for the history that black men have experienced here in the West in particular, and the way it impacts how we're received by the public, right? So when you talk about believe her, the legacy of believe her for black men goes back to the plantation. It goes back to the lynchings that went all the way up through the mid-20th century, and then, you know, they kind of changed in how we acknowledge them, and we began to refer to them in terms of police brutality. But prior to that, when they would be outright lynching, sometimes by mobs of people, many of those incidents were initiated. Okay. Many of those incidents were initiated by accusations of sexual assault. Right. And so that said, we have to put this in context. So even when you deal with the woman that accused Kobe, the accusation was enough, and you can even hear it in some of the women we've been listening to today, right? The accusation was enough to permanently make him a rapist in the imagination of many of these people, regardless of whether or not the evidence was definitive. I mean, he clearly won it out of court. And to put that into further context, black men, our experience with the judicial system here is not one like white men's. Right? It is not a given that you are prioritized. If anything, as a black male, it's the exact opposite. Again, our legacy in this country and our relationship to the judicial system is not one that has often yielded justice to the point where innocent black men have gone free. It's actually been quite the opposite. So, you know, when we have black males that actually are exonerated, or don't even, you know, are able to settle out of court, things of that nature, for that to still be viewed as evidence of a crime is preposterous when you put it in a historical context, and that applies to Kobe as well. But I think we have a caller, so I want to give the caller a moment. Tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Oh, this is Ian from Georgia. How you doing?
Good. How you doing, Ian?
All right, good, wonderful.
Give us your thoughts, man. What are you thinking about?
Well, you just jumped right into the whole debate, because there's a spiritual component that often gets overlooked. Mm-hmm. And as spirituality, as we know, is the great driver of behavior, thought, and systems. And so in the system, or the spiritual system that most of us have adopted, the black man has become that devil, in a sense. That's just like with Santa Claus. I mean, you had Krampus. Krampus was a dark, figure, representative of the black male. Basically, it was like, okay, you either get if you're good, you get the white male at Christmas. If you're bad, this black man comes down the chimney, and he kidnaps you, and that's been a couple hundred-year-old myth. You understand what I'm saying? So, unfortunately, in our community, a lot of our spiritual systems, even if they're African-based and a lot of New Age-based, they still, in a lot of ways, are based on old structural ideas about who is who, as far as who is good and who is evil. The systems may change, but the players don't. You know what I'm saying? There's all the assigned play. You already have your assigned. If you're a pawn, just because you change spiritual systems, you still remain a pawn.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So, in a lot of ways, in my own experience, just as you play the female, more than likely the way the female was speaking in terms of Cali, she's not talking from a Christian perspective. For all we know, she could be practicing an African-oriented religion. But at the same time, it's still framed in terms of the players based on the old model of a racist model.
Okay. Sarah, is Ron respond to that at all?
Right. So again, what often people do, particularly as they feel as though they're evolving, they will invoke the word spirituality when they have basically rejected the tenets of religion, or they feel as though religion has been used as a tool of manipulation or whatever, and then they'll invoke that they're spiritual, and they'll start to gain a little bit of knowledge about spirituality, and then but not really truly understand it. And so then it ends up being just almost the same thing that they're getting away from, where religion has been used as a tool. They end up doing exactly the same thing and using the spirituality as a tool to attack and to justify things that they want. And so they don't see the irony in that in that process. Okay, again, the guy, and to the brother's point, see that the problem is that the religion and spirituality has been co-opted and distorted and used as a tool, for that purpose. And so images have been changed and distorted, and used, for that purpose. That's not how they were originally, So now, when she referred to Kali, again, Kali is a Hindu goddess in the Indian system of Sanatana Dharma, who, amongst her attributes, is destroyer of ego. She's also considered to be the mother of the universe, which is correlated to Aset in the Kemetic pantheon. She's, and consort of the Lord Shiva, who is also, creator and destroyer, of the universe. But again, because people will pick on a little bit of knowledge and then use it to support whatever it is they want to do with it, then it just becomes a tool of manipulation in their hands and a tool to attack people. And that's how she used that particular reference.
Well, I want to add, I'm going to take this into a slightly different direction. And I just want to say, there's the number of the tweets that I read. One of the questions that I experienced online was somebody said, well, those people aren't being followed by very many folks. So these are just some random cases. And in some instances, that's true. I mean, out of the several or so tweets I read, one person has less than 300 followers, another has less than 700, another just over 1,700. One of them has nearly 30,000, however. But the online videos are a different thing, because it's not so much about followers, it's the number of views. And some of those range up to even 13,000 for, some of the videos that you guys heard. But I do want to play one that was actually, posted by a sister who was a bit enraged at the treatment of Kobe. And I wanted to give her some space in this discussion as well. So if we can go ahead and play a couple of minutes from this one. I think it's about two and a half minutes almost.
I'm looking at the journalist Felicia, and she is somebody who has gone through sexual assault herself. And she said that in the Washington Post. She released an article a couple of years ago detailing her experience. So as a journalist, which is not what we do, we are a talk show with opinion.
But you were a journalist,
and I was a journalist for 10 years prior to taking this job. So as a journalist, it's our job to objectively report the news. I know that would be tough if you're someone who survived sexual assault. But when I'm looking at this story, she didn't give the story any context. And she got upset that she was being attacked on Twitter for tweeting a link that basically was condemning Kobe's character and accusing him of rape. But I think her job as a journalist was to put that in context. You have the responsibility, and you need to have the journalistic acumen to write the full story. Go to the Washington Post and say, this man is a nuanced character. This man has a detailed, layered history that we need to discuss. But don't just tweet that out and be the political reporter for the Washington Post and tweet that and leave it there, because you're leaving yourself open to the attacks that you're now receiving. And so whether or not she should be fired, you know, I think that she should be put on leave like she was. I think it's inappropriate because we're in a time where we don't know what journalism is anymore. We have our president that attacks journalists. We have TMZ that broke the news to Vanessa Bryant that her husband passed away. You know, what are we doing now that we need to look at ourselves, people who call themselves journalists? We have journalists attacking a 7-year-old child, which is Blue Ivy, and we look at them calling out her characteristics. We need to do better altogether as journalists. And I look at this woman and I say it was your responsibility just to do better and give it more time than 2 hours after the man passes away to say what you think about him if it's negative. And, you know, don't hide behind somebody else's article. I stand behind a journalist named Jillian Sheldon. She sat at that Kobe trial for 6 weeks. She followed it in Colorado, in and out, stayed there, interviewed all the lawyers, interviewed the woman who was accusing him. And she said, how can we use someone's worst day on this earth as a referendum on their character in totality? And we can't, because just like Kobe, we all have flaws and we're all layered individuals. And we've seen this story time and time again, too many times when it's a black man and a white woman that's an accuser, when that's the story and it goes down and he just goes and gets convicted by the public jury. And we've seen the story too many times where women who have been sexually assaulted cannot give their voice to the public and are not given the space they need to share their story. So this is a complicated thing to talk about, but I really think that as a journalist, if you're going to take that name and that stance and that dignity of a position, you should probably do it properly and just try to tell the complicated story with as much care as possible. And that goes for everybody involved in this Kobe situation.
Wow.
Well said. I know. I want to give you a round of applause.
So there was clearly a different type of response than what we've been hearing from others, and she's referring to the Washington Post journalist Felicia Sonmez, I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name, who took Kobe's passing as an opportunity to put that out there. But I just want to say with this, you know, I came up, there's a concept that's been popular in black male studies and it's growing, and the concept is called anti-black misandry. So transference deals with this notion that the acts of one black man only on a negative level impact the rest of the group, whereas the positive acts of one white man impact the entire group positively, but it never works in reverse. So what do I mean by that? Well, whether we're talking about Kobe Bryant, R. Kelly, Nate Parker, Bill Cosby, it doesn't matter, right? Even right now, the one people are generally extending hate to right after Kobe Bryant is Terry Crews, right? Black men cannot be forgiven, and somehow black men that are condemned publicly become the face of all black men. But when you start to deal with white masculinity, it's the opposite, right? So you can look at Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy or even George Bush, and none of those, if we were going to talk about, or even our current president, right, Donald Trump, none of them become the face, the face of white men. Whether they're serial killers, whether they're politicians that we don't like, whether they've raped somebody and they were even found guilty of rape in court. None of them become the face of white men. But, positive white men, or at least white men that have done something successful, become the face of the possibility of all white men. So transference deals with this issue in terms of how white and black men are seen publicly. But the other side to it, the underside of transference, is that, there is no forgiveness. Black men cannot, once condemned, work their way out in the public imagination out of this guilt. They are permanently branded by it. It's merely at the accusation, and because of that, it's considered improper to even look at whether it be false paternity or whether it has to do with false accusations of sexual assault or rape. All of these things become minuscule improbabilities that don't really exist even when the evidence is staring us in the face, even when it's clear that there may be a money grab of some sort. Anyway, so when we're dealing with transference, I wanted to just kind of put that out there because we're seeing it propping up over and over and over again when it comes to the condemnation of black males in public, and the linking of black males to these very old stereotypes about sexual aggression, violence, and rape. And these, become very consistent tropes. But I did want to shout out the fact that there were some that were critiquing some of this that's going on publicly, and I wanted her to give her, the stage to kind of do that. But Brother Sarah, any thoughts about what you heard?
Well, about what I heard, and then also your comments. Interestingly, as I was leaving work to come here to do the show, I mentioned to some of my colleagues at work that I was leaving to go to do the show, and he asked me, what we were going to do the show on. So, I mentioned we were going to do Kobe Bryant, focusing on, the aspect of him as being a role model for black men. And so he asked me if we were going to deal with the issue of him being, the rape issue, the accusation of rape. And I said, well, certainly we are. And one of the things I said that we would show the contrast of is how he has been stigmatized based upon that accusation as a black man. And he's been stigmatized as a racist, continues to be stigmatized by some that way. But when you look at it from a comparative point of view, there's another person who did rape someone, who plays professional football for the Pittsburgh Steelers, the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger, who raped a woman in a club in the men's bathroom. He drug her into the bathroom against her will, as opposed to having a woman come to his hotel room late at night. He drug her into the bathroom against her will, had some off-duty policemen guarding the door on his behalf, white policemen, mind you, who did not testify against him, even though they were part of law enforcement, a benefit that a black man doesn't have.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't hear Ben Roethlisberger being stigmatized as a racist. That's never brought up in any conversations about him. He's still in the public eye, but it's never brought up. And so, I think that attests to your point about the stigmatization of black men. And if I don't know if you want to go into some trying to contrast some of the facts of the case, but I'll just point out that if a woman goes to a man's room in after 12 a.m., I don't think there's really much question of what the purpose of her going to the room is for.
Well, I think one of the things we can definitely say about Kobe's case is it brought to the forefront discussions about consent, right? Because, she did come to his room. They did begin kissing voluntarily. And to Kobe's understanding, he said the rest of it, everything was consensual. As a matter of fact, other reports suggest that afterwards she went to a party and bragged about, Kobe's penis size and having sex with him, so on and so forth. And then later on, it became a whole... Okay, it looks like we got a caller in. Caller, turn down your volume so there's less feedback.
Hello?
Yeah, hold on one second. Just turn down your volume so there's no feedback. Okay. So anyway, there's definitely questions about that. And so when they settled out of court, many believe that was her primary motivation in this, of course, because, when they actually did investigate her, they did find that her vaginal walls were torn, but she was also quite active, even engaging in sex right after with other people. And so there was this whole question about, okay, where is consent to what? How do we define it? How do we frame it? How does it work? So on and so forth. And that kind of went back and forth. And Kobe himself came forward and apologized in a way afterwards, not suggesting that he was guilty, but suggesting that he could see, how there could be a difference in interpretation because consent had not, the discussion on consent had really not taken place publicly in that kind of way as we're familiar with somewhat now. So there's a lot there, but Kobe's kind of experience with it was, this was a consensual act. She came to my room. She knew what this was. And it was only later, apparently after the death of Trayvon Martin, where, Kobe did mention that he did know how it felt to be, unjustly accused of having committed a crime, and not having done so. So he did recognize it, but he was very, he had to be very polished about how he dealt with it because the vitriol was so deep. Mm-hmm. But it was deep because as a black male, the accusation was enough. And I think part of what I'm trying to get at in today's program is the accusation was enough strictly on the basis of him being black and male. And so in the minds of many, and apparently with many black women, the accusation thus suggests something that's true. And this is not something that people misrepresent. People that come forward in any capacity don't have ulterior motives. It's just purely on the honor system, but the honor system kind of works 100% of the time when it comes to accusing black men, and we seem to accept it, right? To the point where this man can be labeled nothing more than a rapist, really even before his wife finds out that he's passed. I mean, this is the level of vitriol that black men are becoming familiar with and beginning to chafe at. I think black men are beginning to respond, and definitely there was an outpouring of frustration, from black men about this kind of perception of Kobe, because it wasn't just about Kobe, and many black men knew that. It was about black men as a whole, and so the level of pure misandry that's coming out of this is such that black men themselves are really beginning to take stock and step back and look at how they're being perceived, not only by the larger public, but even intra-racially in the black community in and of itself. These are the things that are impacting us. Now we have a caller. Did you have a statement or a question you'd like to put forth? Give us your name and where you're calling from.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Osa. I'm calling from Houston, Texas.
All right. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Is that Dr. THasan-Johnson?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, sir. I forgot the name of, I didn't catch the other gentleman's name.
Brother Sarah is on the line, host of Journey into Self.
Okay. Not Sarah. Oh, Sarah. Okay, cool. Yeah, good evening. I just wanted to chime in and first of all, wanted to thank you guys for what you're doing. And yeah, it's ever like the death of Kobe Bryant has really affected me seriously. I'm not from the U.S. I do live here, but I'm from Central Europe, and Kobe Bryant, of course, has had a lot of influence in my life. He's the one that got me playing basketball since '96, and I'm also quite shocked at the response that this news has gotten. I mean, I was at work, and this was on Monday, and I had mentioned to some friends at work, like, hey, have you heard about Kobe Bryant and everything that happened and stuff? He passed away and this and that, helicopter crash, and they say, yeah, I heard about him, but they were so dismissive about this. Now, I'm not trying to, put race in the mix, but this was a white guy, right? And mind you, this guy, we usually only talk about working out and this and that, and he would say that, he goes to church, reads the Bible with the family, and all of those godly things that they do that I don't really want to hear because I'm not really Christian. But I mentioned Kobe Bryant's death to him, and the first thing he can say is that, yeah, well, he was a great basketball player, but I can't say that I respect the guy. And I'm like, why? And he said, yeah, well, because, he had a scandal. He raped somebody. I'm like, he was accused of rape. And he beat the case. I say, you do know this guy just died yesterday, right? Like, mind you, this is somebody I'm usually we're always cool and we're always cordial, right?
Right.
But anything regarding Kobe right now, I'm taking off anybody's head. I don't care. I don't care because it's too much. This guy just died with his daughter.
Right.
And I'm like, so where's all this Christian shit at? Oh, sorry for cursing. Where's all this Christian mumbo jumbo at that you keep talking to me about how you read the Bible and this and that, huh? What would Jesus do in this case? Would he condemn somebody that just died, just like you are?
Right.
And he didn't really have much to say. And I think we somehow got distracted by somebody else, and he took off. He just left. Okay. But I'm going to follow up with that. I'm just waiting to see him again. And anyway, I'm a little, last
no, I
I've
understand.
been very passionate, and I'm just like, I'm literally like a pit bull ready to bark and attack anybody. And it's just, I don't understand it. Like, what did this man has had a clean career except for that incident in Denver that we all know was consensual. Come on.
Hey, we're only going to do, thank you, brother, for calling in and giving your insight.
Yeah.
We're going to go over just about 10 minutes today. We're going to go to about 6:10, but Sarah, man, any responses to that? Any reflections?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you,
yeah. Thank you, brother. For one, the brother, talked about, he made reference to the Bible, right? And, one of in the Bible it says, he without sin cast the first stone, right? No one's perfect, right? And so what people have an inability to do, is to realize that, not only do people make mistakes, but also people grow. You're not who you were yesterday. You're not who you were, 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So, people fail to be able to, look at how people have grown and become, different people. He's grown into a role model as a husband. He's grown into a role model as a father. He's grown as a role model as a mentor, right? But people want to just hold on to an image which based upon an accusation again, and hold on to that. And why is that? You know that there's race, a racist component to that. To characterize black men as predators.
Right. Well, I think we also have to keep in mind there's a population of people that actually do believe that Kobe did not rape her, but still nonetheless were angry at Kobe for engaging in extramarital sex, right? And it's interesting to me because I've heard from those people as well at this time, and there's still very little empathy for Kobe having passed. There'll sometimes be some empathy toward his daughter, but even amongst those people, the argument is still, well, he cheated on his wife. And I think one of the tweets I read even alluded to that. But the interesting thing to me is, well, okay, if that's the logic we're using, then how many people, everyday people who aren't celebrities, who are involved in this conversation, should be canceled on the basis of having cheated on their spouse?
Well,
and how many of us actually believe that's only men? And that's one of the interesting things about this discussion too. We seem to believe that only men engage in this.
Scripture. You know, lay he without sin cast the first stone.
And we don't want to talk about it along those terms, because if we out people along those lines, it's going to be a whole lot of folks getting hurt in this discussion. Because when it comes to infidelity, that is hardly limited to men. But something else I wanted to bring. Oh, go ahead.
And if his wife could forgive him, why can't you?
Right. Exactly. But something else I wanted to add to this, when we returning back to the rape issue, is that I find it very interesting that we can have this conversation and people can be real comfortable condemning black men via Kobe or any other celebrity for that matter, even on the day of his passing, but say not a mumbling word about black male rape. Not a word. And so I want to kind of put what I just said in a little bit of context, right? Basically, the FBI created and defined the concept of rape. And early on, from 1930 to 2012, it basically meant the carnal knowledge of a female forcibly and against her will. And because of that definition, that's why you could actually have statistics that say that, 99% to 100% of rapes happen to women. Well, of course, if the formal definition of rape has to do with carnal knowledge of a female forcibly and against her will. But they later began to expand that definition and did not limit it to just female victims. And one of the things they began to find was now they could make sense of all of the reports that were coming in of boys and men who had been raped, right? And one of the newest categories developed by the Centers of Disease Control was the concept of being made to penetrate. So this involved male and female victims forced to penetrate someone else, with their own body parts or a foreign item. And so the rates of made to penetrate affecting LGBT, couples or people who had experienced that as LGBT, as well as men, it began to shift. And what we began to see is that the rates of rape initiated by men to women and women to men were almost exactly the same. They were in the same ballpark. Once we began to understand the way men especially experience sexual violation or sexual violence in general, it opened up the definition altogether, because now it was talking about penetrating another person either by physical force or coercion. So what that meant, and I'll give real life incidents, there was a case, I think it was in Seattle, where a man woke up in the morning and a woman had broken into his apartment and had actually begun to, she had seen him around, but she began to have sex with him while he was asleep, and he woke up inside of her. That would be an example of made to penetrate. Another example would be if somebody had some incriminating photos or information of you and said, if you do not provide me sexual service, I will release these. Or an employer at work, and this blends into other forms of violation we could talk about, who demands sex in order for you to keep your job or to be promoted. These are the kinds of things that were never part of the narrative of rape until in the last really 7-8 years. And so what we began to find with black males in particular is when you add up the made to penetrate cases, rape by the new FBI definition, and prison sex and assault, what we find is, statistically speaking, it is my argument that black men actually experience rape at higher rates than any other demographic. Now, America is the only country where it's arguable that men actually experience rape more than any other country because of the rates of incarceration, right? There's about 220,000 women incarcerated. There's over 2.5 million men. That said, because so many men are incarcerated, the rape rates are askew. But black males are incarcerated more than any other group. So when you really began to look at this framework, the rape that black males experience at the hands of women and other men, even as boys or as grown men, are actually incredibly high. But there's no conversation for that. So somebody like Kobe can die in a tragic accident, and we can quickly refer to him as a rapist without even blinking, but there's still no national conversation on black male rape. And so I find it really interesting and hypocritical in that way, that black men can be the face of rape, but their own victimization by rape, where they suffer in really the highest numbers, goes unspoken.
Yeah, that also, the whole issue, again, he was accused of rape by a white woman. right? And we go back into history, and how many black men have been falsely accused of rape by white women? And how many horrible events have been precipitated by the false accusation of rape by a white woman? And so I find that, particularly interesting that black women would find themselves as being perpetuators of that type of stigmatization, given the type of history and that the black community has had, where the communities were destroyed based upon the false accusations of a white woman of rape, and that black women would find themselves being allies in that demonization of black men as sexual predators of white women.
Right. Tropes that go back, generations that comfortably fit the current model, but nobody wants to question that. I mean, that's one of the things that is highly frustrating about this, is to know. Like, most people, when you confront them with the fact that there's been a legacy of maligning black men on the basis of sexual assault and rape, nobody disagrees that that's the historical legacy. But somehow we don't seem to make the connection between how that historical legacy can play into our comfort with accepting black male guilt at the merest suggestion of it, right? And that's the thing that bothers me, because all of a sudden it's considered an attack on the victim if you point out that there's been a legacy and a history of dishonesty toward black men that nobody wants to deal with.
Absolutely. And as we dealt with this subject with, you and my show and vice versa, we both made the point about how this is being manipulated, behind the scenes by, the intelligence community and, the forces of white supremacy to drive a wedge between, black men and black women. And it's unfortunate that, people are allowing themselves to be manipulated in this way and used as pawns, unwitting pawns. And it's, it really frustrates me to see, how people are just so caught up in it that they cannot step out of themselves to be able to see how they're being used in this fashion.
Well, and I think, part of the issue with that is alongside these kinds of critiques, they were also linked to a certain type of social access, a certain type of middle class possibility. So even amongst poor, particularly amongst the poor, you had access to state resources, welfare, and the like that many black men didn't have access to. But even amongst what we would call middle class in the black community, which is questionable when compared to other communities, but even amongst the middle class, you had greater college access. So there were incentives, material incentives that have been tied to, the type of access promised, and with that often came a certain level of disregard and vitriol toward black men, especially if you were able to sit in some of these classes. And I'm saying this as an educated man who sat in these classes. I've had professors, sometimes black professors, many times black women professors, teach in class that black men do not love their families, black men are rapists. I've sat in graduate courses and had women professors who I greatly respected and saw like mother figures even malign black men or promote an environment for black female students to malign black men as an academic gesture, as a reflection of academic prowess. And it's become part of the culture of the academy to do so. And so if that's happening amongst the intellectual elite, well, what's happening in the public? What are the ideas being trickled out through media? And we can see what they are and how they work. So among both strata, right, whether we're talking about the lettered or the unlettered, the poor or the middle class, we're seeing the same kind of discourses on black men that merit no reflection and no empathy and leave black men permanently guilty of crimes regardless of what happens in a court of law, regardless of the circumstances of the accusation, regardless of the behavior of the accuser. Black men remain permanently guilty, even after death. I mean, one of the things in recent reports in the last few weeks was that Oprah Winfrey pulled out of the documentary that was initially going to be about a white sexual assault offender, but she decided apparently, or her camp or someone involved in that decided to shift that to Russell Simmons. And the public backlash led by black men like 50 Cent began to question her doing this, especially after we already saw it done with R. Kelly, and she kind of led the push on Michael Jackson and put the film out after his death about him being guilty. You know, so she pulled out of the Russell Simmons, but the fact that she was doing it, you know, is part of what I'm looking at. There is currency in maligning black men. There's social currency in it. There's material currency, especially if you're somebody like an Oprah, and it's acceptable. Nobody has a problem with it, and when black men voice their issues with it, it usually goes, unheard. So it's interesting to me that she at least pulled back from that, but then she came out later and said she didn't do it because she was pressured. So at the end of the day, black male voices are still not acknowledged openly, but it's nonetheless what we see happening.
Indeed, and as you pointed out, and in the comments that you just made, you just demonstrated that black women have the platform in order to be able to launch that type of attack. There is no black male platform to defend themselves. There is no black male, positive black male who has a show, who has a platform to promote any positive black male images, to discuss issues that pertain to black men. There's nothing like that, So someone like an Oprah and her friend was a gay or whatever, they'll have shows and they have the opportunity and the platform to be able to be used as pawns to attack the imagery of black men, and that's exactly what's done.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, man, I want to thank you for coming out and helping me with this. As I said on your show, this was a highly fraught situation, an emotional issue, and I really appreciate you coming out and helping me engage it. Remind people, where they can check you out and how they can hear your show.
Well, my show airs on the first and third Tuesdays of every month here on Interlight Radio. The show is called Journey into Self. My name is Hasan Ra. You can find more information about me on my website, which is www.sa-ra.org. But my name is not spelled with a dash. The dash is just there for internet purposes, to make that point. You can also find me on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter. You can reach out to me by Facebook Messenger, and I also do spiritual counseling services. So if you feel yourself in need of that service, then please avail yourself of that on the website.
Thank you.
And Brother Jamal reminds me to promote the YouTube channel. I also have a YouTube channel under the same name, Sarah.
All right. And please do that, especially if you need counseling services. As I said on my last YouTube show, I want, brothers have to engage in a new level of brotherhood, because at the end of the day, no one else is coming for us. No one else really understands our experience, and very few have empathy for it. But at best, other brothers, and that's not even always a given. So we definitely need to work together. As far as YouTube is concerned, I have a show starting in 15 minutes on my YouTube channel where I'll be interviewing Dr. Tim Golden, philosopher, about his work regarding black men and black masculinity. And I want to close out by saying thank you for supporting the Onyx Report. And remember, I'm here to tell black men most especially that we are not criminals by birth. We're not perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support lotteries, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We're thinkers, innovators, inventors, leaders, fathers, and men. Embrace your humanity, brothers, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. Peace.